Chapter 20. Miss Montrose. My wife and Franz were delighted to see us return safely, though a bit alarmed at Fritz's absence. We told our tale, emphasized by Jack's still pale appearance. Elizabeth trembled as we described the desperate encounter. On hearing of poor old Juno's sad death, tears came to Franz's eyes. He said quietly, "Were you able to bring her body back? I would like the honor of burying our friend." The next day he did so, setting up a stone with Ernst's help. Juno, a true servant and faithful friend, who met her end fighting bravely in her master's cause. The boar's meat delighted my wife. I had promised Ernst the boar's head for the museum, so we took it and the lion's skins to Whale Island for tanning and dressing. As days passed, I grew increasingly anxious for Fritz. On his 5th day of absence, I announced to my family over dinner, "I'm taking the pinnace to search for him." "I'd like to go," said Elizabeth. The rest felt likewise, and we began preparing for a major expedition. The next morning dawned bright and breezy. We and the dogs boarded the pinnace and ran for Cape Cathedral. It was a beautiful voyage with everyone in high spirits. With the archway in sight, I saw a dark mass dead ahead, just below the surface. "Brace for a shoal," I called out, and everyone took hold. As I steered to miss it, I thought to myself, a sunken rock. Why didn't I notice it here before? It was too late. We felt the keel scrape over it, but fortunately it didn't tear a hole in the pinnace. When I glanced back to fix the spot in my mind, the rock was gone. Jack announced, "Another to starboard, father." Sure enough, there lay what looked like another sunken rock. "It's moving!" shouted Franz. A great black body emerged from the sea, and from its top rushed a mighty column of water that felt like rain all around us. Now the mystery was explained. As the beast emerged further, I recognized the distinctive form of a cachalot whale, a very dangerous animal known to sink larger boats than ours. Apparently, offended at being run over, the whale was lining up for a run at the pinnace. I sprang to one of the small swivel-mounted cannons and Jack manned the other. We both aimed and fired without hesitation. The whale lashed the water with its tail a few times and then plunged out of sight beneath the surface. I snapped orders. "Reload! Ernst, pilot us towards shore! Franz, keep a sharp lookout for him!" Soon we sighted the great whale's death throes in the shallows near the shore. Ernst calmly lined up the pinnace within easy cannon shot, yet out of range of the furious slashing tail. Both cannons boomed again, and after a few more moments of frantic struggle, the cachalot lay still in the shallows. The boys were about to raise a cry of victory, but Franz hissed, "Quiet, I see someone. Look, over behind the rock." We all saw a figure in the boat far up the shore. He was quickly maneuvering his craft into hiding. Positive identification was impossible. I feared the worst. "Load the guns, but don't attack except in self-defense," I ordered. "We won't be taken easily, but we won't start a fight." We waited and watched, someone still peeking out from behind a rock higher up on the shore, then vanished. A few seconds later, another face popped out from behind the original rock. Everyone looked anxious at me for orders. "Hoist a white flag," I said, "and hand me the megaphone." Using the megaphone and speaking Malay, I shouted, "We want to be friends. Please come out and identify yourself." There was no movement. Jack lost patience after a moment, grabbed the megaphone, and bellowed in English, "Come out, you coward, or we'll blast you. We're just—" "Stop that," I said. "You'll provoke a foolish fight." "No, see, he's coming toward us," Jack cried. Sure enough, the canoe was rapidly approaching. "Look, he's in Fritz's kayak. I can see the walrus head," said Franz. Again, I thought the worst, but only for a moment. Only Ernst remained calm. He took the megaphone and called out, "Fritz, come back, old fellow." Before Ernst even finished speaking, I too recognized the well-known face. In another minute, the brave boy was welcomed with a slew of questions. "Where have you been? Why were you away so long? Why did you hide from us?" He smiled. "Right now, I'll only answer the last question. The rest can wait. I didn't think you'd come out here in the pinnace. So I thought, who else would have cannon? Malay pirates?" I hid and watched, and then, Father, you shouted in Malay, which seemed to confirm my fears. Only when Jack started yelling insults in English did I realize whose boat it was. We then described our adventure with the cachalot whale, and I asked if he knew a good anchorage for us. "Certainly," he replied, with a meaningful glance at me. I can lead you to one in Pearl Bay, and the scenery is lovely." Turning his kayak, he piloted us through the vaulted cavern and over the calm water toward a pretty island in the bay. Now that I knew Fritz had found the person he sought, there was no reason to keep the story from my wife, and I quietly shared it. She was startled yet delighted. "Another human being, and another woman to boot," she whispered to me. "I love you all, but you can't know what it's been like being the only female. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because if our hopes failed, you would have been terribly disappointed," I explained. The boys were curious about our whisperings, but too busy sailing the pinnace to pay much attention. Fritz piloted us to a good landing spot on the island. Once we were ashore, we followed him in silence. He led us through a thicket and into a clearing where we discovered a hut made of branches. Fritz disappeared into the leafy shelter. He reappeared a moment later, bringing with him a handsome youth in a naval uniform. Fritz was radiant as he made the introduction. "Please welcome Edward Montrose. Father, Mother, will you accept him into our family as a brother?" I could see that my wife was no more fooled than I was, but I assumed Fritz had his reasons. Perhaps the girl was embarrassed at being seen in men's clothing. "Indeed," I exclaimed, offering my hand. "Our wild life hasn't hardened our manners. Be welcome." My wife heartily embraced the youth, and my younger sons and the dogs all joined in welcoming Edward. My sons ran back to the pinnace to bring provisions and cooking gear, and before long my wife set a fine meal before us. Soon Edward was laughing and chatting as gaily as the rest. Our celebratory feast lasted well into the evening, and everyone drank to the newcomer's good health. When the youth grew tired, my wife led Edward to sleeping quarters aboard the pinnace, and the rest of us were too excited to sleep for just yet. After Elizabeth returned, Jack threw some more wood on the fire, plopped down in his usually careless fashion, and exclaimed, "Now then, Fritz, let's have it. Where did you find him? Was it luck, or did you go looking for him?" We all waited to hear the tale. Fritz hesitated a moment and then began. "You may remember me telling you that on my earlier voyage I knocked down an albatross. That albatross brought me a notice of a shipwrecked stranger, and I went I sent back an answering note with the same bird. It was full of hope, but I needed to add a second seat to the canoe. When the time was right, I took Pounce and went searching. After several hours of paddling, the weather got worse, and I found shelter for the night in a quiet cove. The next morning, I decided the weather was good enough to keep going. I was looking for smoke or any other trace of human habitation, and at noon I came to a new area of coast, with sandy shores bordering dense woods. I could hear the fiendish laughs of hyenas, the cries of apes, and the death bleats of deer. I felt very solitary and thoughtful. I paddled on for some hours more. There were river mouths, which I might otherwise have been tempted to explore, but the message had arrived by albatross. Whoever sent the message would not be found up a river. At nightfall, I found a cove to moor the kayak, stretched my legs a bit, had dinner, then went back aboard for the night. The next morning, Pounce and I landed for breakfast. He had brought down a plump parrot, and I lit a fire to roast it. During this, I heard a slight rustle in the long grass behind me, and I turned and found myself face to face with an immense tiger. Now Fritz's voice became solemn, and I noticed for the first time that he had come back without the eagle. He went on. "In another moment, I would have been dead, and our young guest would have been doomed to God only knows how many more years of solitude. There was no way I could reach my gun in time. Pounce saw my danger, and he attacked the tiger's face. His slashing and flapping distracted the tiger just long enough for me to grab my gun and aim. I put a bullet in the tiger's heart, and the beast's spring died before it began. Pounce lay motionless on the ground close by. The tiger had batted him down with one furious paw blow. I checked for signs of life, but Pounce would never rise again." Fritz's voice shook, and he was silent for a moment before continuing. "I was as sad as I've ever been. I buried my friend where he died, too sad to even care about the tiger skin. I paddled away. I felt a terrible loneliness, and I began to despair of success. Maybe the albatross had come hundreds of miles. Maybe the stranger was on faraway shores. Perhaps I was going in the wrong direction. I wasn't discouraged for long. I paddled around a peninsula and came into a bay. The other side of the bay seemed to be another peninsula covered in thick forest. At the rocky tip of this peninsula, I saw a column of smoke rising into the air. At first, I just gazed at it, like in a dream. Then I began to paddle with all my might. I secured the kayak nearby and jumped ashore. The fire looked freshly built. I was about to shout, but before I could do so, I saw a slight figure coming toward me. I advanced a few paces and said in English, "Welcome, fair stranger. Merciful God has heard your call and has sent me to help you." Miss Montrose came quickly forward. "Who? What?" interrupted the boys. Amid the general hubbub, Ernst said quietly to his brother, "I wasn't going to spoil your secret, Fritz, but we no longer need pretend not to see through the disguise." Fritz was embarrassed at his slip of the tongue, but he took his brother's kidding in good spirits, and they all gave 3 cheers for their new sister. When the hubbub died down, he picked up the story again. Miss Montrose took my hands and said, "I've been waiting for you ever since the bird brought back your message. Thank God you've come." With tears of joy and gratitude, she led me to a tree house she had built, sort of a small falconhurst. Below it was a hut where she kept bows, arrows, spears, bird snares, basic fishing gear, knives, and all sorts of other tools. 3 years before, she said, she had survived a shipwreck on this coast. The tools and a trunk of clothing were all she had been able to salvage. It was immediately clear she is marvelously self-reliant, motivated, and intelligent. I knew Mother would be delighted to meet a woman as resourceful as herself. Imagine my surprise when a cormorant flew out of her hut as if to attack me. Miss Montrose called it off, then explained that she had captured it and trained it to catch fish. What a wonder! She had utensils as fine as ours, and she cooked me the most appetizing meal. While we ate, she told me her story. Her first name is Jenny. She was born in India, the daughter of a British colonel who had served there for many years. Her mother died of a fever when Jenny was 3. Her father tried his best to teach her womanly arts, but also instilled in her a great love of camping, riding, hunting. By the age of 17, she was as much at home on horseback in the woods as she was at her father's formal dinner parties. When Colonel Montrose was ordered home with his regiment, he didn't like the idea of bringing her aboard the troop ship, so he booked her homeward voyage on another vessel. The separation pained father and daughter alike, but it was necessary. Miss Montrose sailed from Calcutta in the Dorcas, bound for England. A week out, a storm drove their vessel off course. It grew too leaky to manage, and the crew took to boats. Jenny was in the largest boat. They endured the open sea for many days, and further bad weather separated the 3 boats. When her boat sighted land, its occupants tried to reach it, but the boat capsized in the surf. She was the only one to reach shore alive, half drowned. When she revived, she managed to find some oysters and crabs and began to recover her strength. Since that day, I was the first human being she had seen. She always kept a fire going to try to attract any passing ship. She began attaching messages to any birds that she could capture alive. The albatross she had partly tamed, but since it often went off on long flights, she decided to send a message in hopes it would return with an answer. Our dinner was over, and we were both weary from the day's excitement. She went to sleep in her treehouse while I slept in the hut below. The next morning, I packed her belongings in the kayak and we got aboard. She said goodbye to her familiar bay and we set out. We would have reached Rockburg tonight, but the kayak developed a slow leak. We landed on this island so I could patch it. I was just finishing my work when I heard your first shots. As I mentioned before, my first thought was of Malay pirates, and I asked her to stay while I went to investigate. I was certainly glad I was wrong. All had listened attentively to Fritz's story, but Franz now gave out a great yawn, followed by others from Jack and Ernst and Fritz. It had been our most exciting day since being shipwrecked. We went to the pinnace for the night, the men sleeping on deck and my wife joining Jenny below. The next morning at breakfast, I asked Miss Montrose if we might address her by her true name. She smiled. Of course. My disguise could hardly have worked for long. After all, I have no need to be ashamed of my clothing. It's all I have had for the last 3 years, and it has surely been more practical than dresses and hats. After breakfast, I prepared to start for home, but Fritz reminded me of the whale. While I'm not eager to go up through the butchering process again, he suggested, it would be a pity to lose all of that oil. True. Let's do our best to get some and spend another night here, I agreed. Ernst, Jenny, and my wife stayed on the island. The rest of us boarded pinnace and kayak. It took little time to reach the sandbank where the monster lay at low tide. No sooner did we come near that the dogs leapt ashore. Before we could follow, they rushed around to the other side of the carcass. There was a great snarling and howling, and when we arrived, we found our dogs disputing the whale with a pack of wolves. The battle didn't last long after we arrived. 2 wolves already lay dead, and when our guns claimed 3 more, the rest fled. Among them were 2 jackals, and when Coco saw these relatives, his instincts took over. In spite of our shouts and cries, he disappeared with them into the forest. It would have been useless and dangerous to pursue the deserter into the woods. We could only hope he would return. Fritz then climbed up the mountain of flesh with his hatchet and began the process of salvaging the whale oil. We had long been in the habit of bringing a few empty containers in the pinnace, and these were soon full. We returned to the island to find dinner nearly ready. After we got cleaned up, we sat down to relate our adventure over the meal. There was much sorrow at Coco's desertion, but Jenny offered some words of hope. He might still return. Wild animals usually won't tolerate one of their kind who has lived with people. Even though my poor albatross was never completely tame, he used to come back from time to time. Jack, if you were to go searching tomorrow morning, you might find Coco eager to rejoin you. If you like, I'll help you. I'll go to find him, because I myself would love a paddle in the kayak all myself. Jack was delighted with the former suggestion, but wouldn't hear of Jenny going alone. How about if we go first thing tomorrow morning, he suggested. Then let's do so, she agreed, and we all prepared to retire. At sunrise, they were off, armed with some meat and biscuits as a lure, plus a chain and muzzle Jack had thought to confine the renegade. They landed at the sandbar and entered the forest, calling "Coco, Coco," until the woods rang. Soon the deserter came slouching towards them, looking miserable and ashamed. His torn ears and filthy coat testified to the accuracy of Jenny's prediction. Jack had neither the heart nor the need to use the muzzle and chain. Back on the island, dogs and people were overjoyed to welcome back the prodigal, whom I doubted would ever leave us again. All was now bustle and activity, and after breakfast, Fritz and Jack climbed into the kayak. The rest of us took to the pinnace, and we soon left the island and Pearl Bay far behind. The sea's mountain calm was broken only by the gentle breeze carrying us home. Once our kayakers piloted us past the rocks near the archway, they shouted that they were heading home in advance. Jenny was most amazed to see our island fortress, with its flying flag and battery of cannon, and we landed to show off our bastion before heading to Rockburg. As we came into Safety Bay, a grand salute of 12 guns welcomed our expanded family to Rockburg. Ernst insisted upon replying with 13 guns, explaining, "It's a matter of tradition. An odd number is absolutely necessary." Fritz and Jack courteously helped their mother and Jenny ashore. They then led us through the gardens and the orchards along the way to our dwelling. Jenny's surprise changed to wonder and delight as she neared the house itself. Its broad, shady balcony, its fountain sparkling in the sun, the doves and pigeons, the fresh vines. "I can scarcely believe my good fortune," she exclaimed. "It's hard to imagine that I'm still far from any civilized nation, among fellow castaways and friends." When I reached the porch, I got a surprise to equal Jenny's. The boys had laid out a sumptuous lunch on our best china, decanters of wine, a bowl of all types of fruit, a haunch of deer, some chicken, a ham, and other delicacies. In the middle were bowls of milk and great jugs of mead, plus a vase of pretty flowers. The lavish welcome brought tears to Jenny's lovely eyes, and Elizabeth took her inside to change into a fine dress. Now our new daughter looked prettier than ever. Elizabeth and I gave her the place of honor between us, and Ernst and Fritz also sat down, but Fritz and Jack did not. They did duty as our entertainers and servants, bustling here and there, carving meat and filling glasses. "All the servants have run off in our absence, Miss Montrose," explained Jack. "For the next day or two, we'll just have to fill in for them." When the banquet was over, the waiters had also satisfied their appetites. They joined their brothers to show their new sister all the wonders of Rockburg, the house, cave, stables, gardens, fields, and aqueducts. They would probably have worn her out completely, but my wife came to Jenny's rescue and led her back to the house. We had long put off several days of pre-winter repairs at Falconhurst, and the following day we started packing up the needed tools, provisions, and comforts. All our mounts were still in their stables except Hurry the ostrich, which Jack had gone and saddled. Mother, he said, you and Jenny mustn't walk the whole way. He leapt back on Hurry and fled. Before we had gone a quarter of the way to the stables, we heard the thundering tread of many feet galloping down the avenue. Our entire troop of mounts was rumbling towards us. Storm, Lightfoot, Swift, Grumble, Stentor, Arrow, and Dart, with Jack at their heels on his ostrich. At his saddle, banging a cluster of harness equipment, the racket urging the excited animals to higher speed. We stepped aside to evade the stampede, but a shout from Fritz brought the whole herd to a sudden halt, and Jack spurred toward us. Which shall we saddle for you, Jenny? He shouted. They're all as gentle as lambs. Mother has ridden every one, so you can be sure they're safe. Jenny showed her keen judgment by picking out Dart, the fleetest and most spirited of them all. We all set to work harnessing and saddling the mounts. After loading the baskets and hampers on Lightfoot, we rode off toward Falconhurst. Jenny was so delighted with Dart that we all agreed to reserve him for her special use. A week's hard work went swifter than it otherwise might have, for our adopted daughter proved a lively, good-humored, helpful companion. When we finished our repairs, we stayed a day or two longer in order to get chickens from woodlands and collect acorns, grass, willows, and canes for winter food and projects. The showers grew more frequent, and we barely got our mounts back into Roxburgh's stables when the real downpour came. With Jenny around, this once dreary season seemed shorter than ever before and far pleasanter. Everyone quickly learned English from her. Fritz learned to speak it so well that Jenny declared he might be mistaken for an Englishman. For me, it was a winter of to thank God for his beautiful young blessing.